Hi everyone. Assessment one's over and probably a distant memory, but I thought it would be a good idea to take some time to give you all some overall feedback in an effort to help you with the next assessment. You did a really great job with these essays. I know that for many of you, it was the very first assignment you've done in a really long time. Your results are now available, so if you haven't had a look, please do. I provided two types of comments. The first type is in-text comments, so they're the ones written over the top of your essay, and I've used those to highlight areas that you've done really well and also some areas where perhaps you missed something. There's also a general comment, which is some information on what you've done and how you can improve in the future, and also your final grade. It's really important that you read both of those, but let's have a bit of a look at what we all did well and some things that we all still need to think about. Okay. So people generally had a really good structure to their essay. People had introductions, body, conclusion. We could tell that you used the templates, which was brilliant. You generally had one idea per paragraph and the ideas progressed, which was great. Academic tone was really good also. You did a great job of writing in the third person and avoiding I and we, which meant that the language was formal. You addressed the language components and you provided some examples for that, which was fantastic. With the reference list, most of you remembered that you needed to have that on a new page and that it needed to be organised alphabetically. And there were great first attempts at using APA style. In fact, I was really quite impressed. The essay was also informed by scholarly literature and generally used the learning materials as a first point of reference. So all of that was done really well. As I mentioned, there are two types of comments. If you're not sure how to access your results, I've posted a document on our discussion board in the important announcements forum. It looks a bit like this, and then you can see there where I've got an arrow pointing to this thread, the how to access your assessment comments. Okay, so Turnitin is the program that you submit your essays to, and that allows us to give you really detailed feedback on your work. It also allows you to submit and check your work by giving you an originality report. So if you've got time and you're organised, you are actually able to submit your essay to Turnitin, or not to Turnitin. Turnitin is when you're actually submitting, but there's actually a spot where you can submit it so that you can see what your originality report is, which will give you a chance to go back and change things if you want to. I've put a link here which will take you to some information on how to understand and use your originality report as well. We don't have a magic number with originality reports. So there's no number I can say you need to be under this or over that. And the reason for that is it's possible to actually have a really high score because you're still learning to reference and perhaps you haven't referenced that well, and so your score might be quite high, but it's equally possible to have a very low score and for it to be plagiarism. So that's why we don't have a definitive number. It's also why it's important that you check your originality score and your referencing before you submit. Okay, you did a great job with many elements of referencing and in-text citation, so these are just a couple of reminders. So if you were doing an in-text citation and it was a quote, you needed to use quotation marks. That is the one with the two little lines, not one. And then after the quote, in brackets, author, year, and the page number. Just a quick tip, I actually find that if I've included something, I then put it straight into my reference list so I don't forget to put it in later. If you're paraphrasing, you need in brackets the year, author and the year after the sentence or the part that you're paraphrasing, and then add that to your list as well. For your reference list, I've got a bit of a thing here just to help you for all the different types of things that you might come across. So if it's a book with one author, whether it's a journal article or a web page. I've also got a couple of resources down the bottom on this slide. I think one of the things that people did was, although the Fellows and Oakley book that you are reading as your key text is something that you are reading online, it's an electronic version of a book. So even though you are technically retrieving it, you're effectively taking it out of our library, which means that when you reference it, you don't need retrieved from. Retrieved from actually only applies to a web page. So if it's a book or a journal article, no retrieved from, and have a look in the Swinburne Guide if you need more information about that. Okay, many of you wanted to cite secondary sources. That is, you'd read about a researcher in Fellows and Oakley or in the Burke reading, but you didn't actually read the researcher's book yourself. So let's have a bit of a look at this example here. So in this example, Grimm and Alter quote another researcher called Poppet in their book. You've only read about Poppet in Grimm and Alter's book, you haven't read Poppet's book. So when you have to show that as an in-text citation. You won't include Poppet's book in your end reference list. You'll only include the source that you consulted personally, and in this case, that's Grimm and Alter. So your in-text citation would be Poppet, 2008, show that young children should not be left near open fires, as cited in Grimm and Alter, 2008, page 15. Okay, paraphrasing is tricky, and quite a few of you fell into the trap of changing just a few words from an original quote, thinking that maybe if you just changed a few words, that you wouldn't actually have to reconstruct the sentences. And that resulted in high originality scores. And that's because just changing a few words to make it just slightly different from an original text is actually a form of plagiarism. So you just need to be a little bit careful about that. So even if you acknowledge the source that it came from, if it's too similar, then it comes up as technically plagiarism. So if it's something that is being said that you really like, it might be better to quote it. So my suggestion is when you're paraphrasing that you read something that you want, close the text, jot down in note form the gist of what was said, and then construct it back into sentences. That's one way of going about it. Second way of going about it would be underline the key words in a sentence and then reconstruct it. So let's have a look at a couple of examples. So the original text in this one is, giraffes like acacia leaves and hay, and they consume 75 pounds of food a day. So if we think about keywords there, they would be giraffes, acacia leaves, hay, 75 pounds of food and a day. So we can rearrange that sentence so that it says, a giraffe can eat up to 75 pounds of acacia leaves and hay every day. You're effectively saying the same thing, but it's actually a completely different sentence. Another example, any trip to Italy should include a visit to Tuscany to sample their exquisite wines. The paraphrase might be sure to include a Tuscan wine tasting experience when visiting Italy. Okay, you did a great job of including theory into your essay, but I just wanted to clarify a couple of things. So theorists like Piaget and Vygotsky and Skinner and Brunner are responsible for coming up with a theory. Some people fell into the trap of mentioning the theorists when the essay question actually asked you to talk about theoretical perspectives. Now, the reason that that was a problem is because the theoretical perspectives are very easy to link to nature and nurture. The theorists are not so easy to link to nature and nurture. So because you were talking about theorists, some of you forgot to link to nature and nurture, and that was the gist of this essay. So many of you wanted to talk about Piaget and Vygotsky, got a bit sidetracked by using their names, and then actually forgot to connect them to the theoretical perspectives as well. Okay, definitions was a big one. So many people wrote their essay as if they were writing the essay for me, who would know what words like behaviourist theory and phonology would mean. When you're writing academically, you need to assume that the reader is intelligent, but might actually not have a huge amount of knowledge on the subject that they're reading or you're telling them about. Just like when you started out, if Fellows and Oakley hadn't defined all the key terms for you, you wouldn't have been able to understand what you were reading. Key terms in this particular essay were language components, phonology, syntax, pragmatics, semantics, nature, nurture, and whatever theoretical perspectives that you chose. Your audience for the next assessment is going to be a board of governors or a committee of a school or an early childhood centre. So typically a board of governors is not made up of teachers or people who have anything to do with education. They're parents or people from the business community. So it's going to be really important that when you're doing your next assessment that you include definitions so that they can understand what's happening. Okay, it's really important that you start with the learning materials each week. We also want you to base your assessments on the key readings. If you do that, it's really hard to go wrong. Of course, we want you to do wider reading if you want to. You can use that to add to your essay, but don't use them as the basis of your essay. It's the fastest way to go off on a tangent and then accidentally not answer the question. So base your assignments on the learning material readings and then find other wider research to support that. Okay, I can't stress enough how important it is to look at the rubric. We are effectively telling you exactly what we're looking for. So this rubric, for the first assessment, in the past descriptor had 6 descriptors, and in order to pass, you had to address in some way all 6 of those. So your rubric should effectively become a checklist before you submit anything. If you've missed even one tiny element of what's required in the rubric to pass, we can't pass you. So for example, if you've written an amazing essay, it might be a distinction level essay, but you forgot to talk about pragmatics, then technically you haven't answered the question, you haven't met the requirements, and we can't pass you. And that would be such a shame when we've given you a checklist of things you need to have in there. Okay, just to finish up, the Assessment 2 Collaborate is coming up on Tuesday the 2nd of January at 4 o'clock Australian Eastern Standard Time. That's the Tuesday after the Christmas break. We're also aware that with the 4 o'clock time that some people might not be able to make that. So there are some other session times that you can go to, and I will put the links for all 4 session times onto the discussion board. So the other times are, there's a 4 o'clock session on Monday the 2nd of January. There's a session at 3 o'clock on Tuesday the 3rd of January, which is an hour before our one. And there's also an evening one at 8 o'clock on Wednesday the 4th of January. It doesn't matter which one you go to. Obviously, I'd like you to be at mine, but if you can't make it, that's absolutely fine. Have a look at these dates, write it in your diary, change your work schedule if you can, tell your parents you can't come for family dinner, record your favourite TV show. Being at one of these sessions is really going to help your stress levels later. It is recorded, so if you really can't make it, be sure to watch the session afterwards. As always, I'm here to help. Post your questions on the board in the Assessment 2 thread. Other people are probably wondering exactly the same thing as you are, or feel free to email me. Thanks very much for your time. I hope this has been helpful, and I'll see you on the board.